Hello, welcome back to Let's Talk Title with Emerald Coast Title Services. I'm president of ECTS, Dion Moniz.
And I'm Ashley Bowen, the director of operations and a licensed title agent, and also an instructor for Florida Realtors.
It's a mouthful. You're getting so many titles behind your name.
I'm like
now.
you with all my name tags.
All right, so today we're going to give you a little update on the updated Condo Rider for the FAR contract.
This rider was updated on New Year's Eve 2024, and it didn't have a whole lot of changes, but a couple of key changes. And also, I thought this would be a really good time to go over the Condo Rider with everyone, because we see errors in them quite a bit. And right now, with the current landscape of the condo sales in our area, and with the condominiums trying to abide by the new laws of the SIRS, getting their structural integrity reserve studies done and their milestone inspections done, and a lot of special assessments have been levied and assessed, and so
they're not always disclosed,
and maybe the Condo Rider is out of date, and so I just think it's a really good idea for us to go over the Condo Rider with everyone so that you can all be clear and have really nice contracts with riders.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so I think it's very important in the special assessment section. There is a whole section for special assessments and prorations, and the seller is given the option to disclose any special assessments that are levied or pending. It states that the seller represents that the seller is not aware of any special or other assessment that has been levied by the association or that has been an item on the agenda or reported in the minutes of the association within the last 12 months prior to the effective date, except as follows. And that's where the seller needs to list everything that they possibly know that has been discussed in those meeting minutes or that has been levied, so that they're disclosing it fully to the buyer. And then the next line states that if the special assessments have been levied or pending and are disclosed above, they may be paid in installments. And then you can choose whether the buyer or the seller are going to pay them. So it's important to disclose right there.
Yeah.
Give the option of the buyer to pay them after closing or ask for the seller to pay them. And the important part of disclosing is the next line, which says, if special assessments levied or pending exist as of the effective date and have not been disclosed above by the seller, then the seller shall pay such assessments in full at the time of closing.
Yeah, that's the big hook.
It is.
So what I always recommend when we're doing our agent classes is, if you're on the seller side, you need to make sure your seller has pulled the last 12 months of meeting minutes, and he or she goes through them with a fine-tooth comb, and you disclose anything that's remotely related to an increase in dues or assessments. While dues aren't really in here, if there's talk about an increase in dues, disclose that too.
Or even a project that needs to happen in the future, even if they don't know the amount that it's going to cost, I would still disclose they're talking about repaving the parking lots in 2026.
Yep. And I think seller should even provide buyer a copy of the 12 months of minutes. That way buyer has them. So if for some reason something was left off of here, but they've been given all the last 12 months of minutes, then there's still an argument that it was disclosed, maybe not on the rider itself, but disclosed by giving the buyer the minutes to review themselves. So
would you maybe put language in there that says we've attached the meeting minutes for your review?
Yeah, absolutely.
So these condo associations, ever since the milestone inspections and the SIRS have become lawful, the associations have had to get repairs done. And once they're doing these restoration projects, they uncover more repairs. And so the associations sometimes are meeting 2 or 3 times in a month to discuss all of these things. And so also the seller needs to disclose all of this stuff and prepare the form really close to the contract date. We used to always say, go ahead and fill out that association rider or the Condo Rider and put it in your documents and your listing so that the buyers can pull them and attach them to their offers. But I don't recommend that anymore because
it's changing so much.
They change so much.
Yeah.
We just had a closing. It was a 45-day closing, and the association met 4 times within the 45 days from effective date to closing date.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and like you said, it's all related to the SERS stuff. All these projects are having to be done now to get the condos back in line.
Yes, and if your seller is trying to sell their condo because those dues are so much and they're over it, go ahead and disclose everything, because if you don't disclose it and then we find it on the estoppel, then it's going to be all on the seller, and they're going to have to pay it all in full at closing.
Yep, exactly.
And it can be $30,000 to $60,000 these days.
Yeah, we're seeing some big ones. So when in doubt, disclose. And even if the seller has not reviewed the minutes, if it's in the minutes, that knowledge is imputed to the seller, and it pretty much states that in a different way in this rider language. So extremely important to go through and comb through the last year's worth of meeting minutes. So actually, you said in the beginning, you're seeing a lot of them done wrong. So what are the ways that they're being done wrong?
Well, not filling this part out at all is a wrong part. Also, I see a lot of times realtors will confuse the part of the FAR contract, lines 204 to 217, in the closing cost section where it talks about special assessments. A lot of times realtors think that is these special assessments, that, we checked that the seller will pay the assessment in full at closing. But on this section of the FAR contract, lines 204 to 217, that is not talking about condominium assessments. It actually says these are liens imposed by a public body, and a public body does not include a condominium or homeowners association. But a lot of times I get that mistake where they think they've done it properly because they filled this part out of the contract, but it's not. It needs to be done on the Condo Rider.
Exactly.
That's pretty much it. Not disclosing. That's the biggest mistake.
Yeah. So what would be a good example, and you give an example every time we do a class, about a public body special assessment that would trigger this language at lines 204 to 217, like you said?
So that would be, the only one that I know of is in Walton County, when Regional Utilities switched everyone from sewer to septic. They put a sewer pump grinder on everyone's property, and a sewer pump grinder agreement was filed in the county, and they pay that lien on their property $10 or $12 a month on their water bill. Some people don't even know that exists. It's just a part of the water bill.
Yeah. And
so it is important to know if you have one of those, because if you make a mistake on that section of the contract and you say the seller will pay it in full and it still has a $10,000 balance on it, then your seller is going to be stuck paying that in full, where the buyer could have just paid it $10 a month on their water bill.
Yep, exactly.
But only South Walton County is where I've ever seen that. So Regional Utilities, if that is the utility company for your listing, I would call them and ask, is there a sewer pump grinder agreement on this property?
Yep. So that's public body special assessment versus association special assessment.
Yes.
Yeah, so make sure you understand the difference between the two.
And a regular assessment is going to be those monthly or quarterly dues, and the regular assessment pays for things like maintenance, and then usually adds money to the budget each month. That's what you are to pay. That's what you're expecting to pay each month. And the special assessments are those extra things.
Yep. And so within the language of the rider, it does say special or other assessment. And so we had a situation come up, we were doing a closing, and a situation came up to where in the minutes at the meetings between the effective date and the closing date, there was discussion about $1 million plus restoration project, and the association didn't know whether they were going to increase dues or do a special assessment. And come to find out, shortly after closing, they tripled the dues. They decided to increase dues instead of levy a special assessment. Obviously, a big fight broke out between the parties, and they ended up agreeing to split it. But I would argue that other assessment
would be those regular
would be
assessments?
the regular assessments, aka dues. So again, it's just really important, because in the situation I just gave, the seller didn't disclose any of that. Claimed seller didn't know, but it was in the minutes.
So it was imputed knowledge.
Imputed knowledge. Yep. Yep. So extremely important to go through those minutes and disclose.
And disclose everything. Because if the buyer knows going into it that there's a $7,000 or $15,000 assessment coming down the line in October, it's more likely to get them to agree to pay for it when you first go under contract than the day of closing, whenever it's disclosed to them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
Or after closing, then they'll be real mad that they never knew about it.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
So back to the condo writer. The writer gives an option for you to state that either the buyer has already accepted all of the condo documents, they've already received all of the documents required, or that they haven't received them yet. And there's another box that you check, 5B, that says that the agreement is voidable by the buyer, and they can cancel within 3 days after receiving all of the condo documents. And those are the Declaration of Condominium, the Articles of Incorporation of the Association, the bylaws and rules of the association, a copy of the most recent annual financial statement and annual budget, and the frequently asked questions and answers. There is a statute that states that the association has to provide those documents to the seller upon written request. I know a lot of times realtors have a hard time getting those documents from association managers, but it is statutory that they are to provide those things to the seller.
Yeah.
And
I think it's 10 days is the time limit they have.
They have 10 days, and it's statute 718-111. So if anybody ever gives you a hard time about giving you those documents, the seller, as the owner of the property, is obligated to get those.
And if the condo has more than, 25 units, they have to have the portal where the owner can log in online and pull all the documents.
They should all be online.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and there's a similar statute for homeowners associations that have similar disclosure requirements. So keep that in mind as well.
And now we have had situations where the listing agent says the condo association does not have a question and answers. Even though they're statutorily required to, they don't have one. So in that situation, I believe that you drafted some type of language that said that the buyer was accepting the condo documents minus the question and answers.
Yeah, there needs to be some indication that buyer acknowledges that there is no question or Q&A.
Or else the buyer could cancel the contract because they didn't receive that document.
Yeah, exactly. Because we had that come up. It's been a while now, and I can't remember, it may have been the Q&A, but something was left out of the initial condo disclosure, and then right before closing, that last piece was provided, and that reopened. Well, actually, the 3-day clock never started because all the docs weren't provided. Right. So once that last piece of documentation is provided, the 3-day window opens up, and this happened to, the buyer was already kind of looking for a way out, and so that let the buyer get out right before closing, and he got his EMD back, and I had to explain to the seller's agent how buyer was right.
So listing agent, make sure you have all those documents ready to go.
Yes.
And if you cannot get the question and answers or whatever document it is, have a real estate attorney draft some type of an acceptance of all the others minus that one form.
Yeah. So to summarize, 5A is where the documents are provided at least 3 days prior to execution of the contract, and buyers acknowledging having reviewed everything. 5B is saying, hey, buyer doesn't have the docs yet, but once they're provided, buyer will have 3 days to review and cancel if desired.
Perfect.
All right.
Now, the significant changes they added to the FAR Condo Rider is this next one, which is that they added the turnover inspection report to the list of things where you have to say if it's been done or not. So there's already
under section 10.
Yeah, section 10. So has it been done or not? The milestone inspection, you can tell the buyer here if the milestone inspection is required to be completed and has been completed, or if the milestone inspection is required to be completed and has not been completed, or if the milestone inspection is not required. The only time the milestone inspection is not required is if it is under 3 stories and 3 units or less, right?
Correct.
Okay.
3 living units or less and 3 stories. Yeah.
Okay. So anything 3 stories or higher
with at least 4 living
units or more, you have to have the milestone inspection.
Yep.
And the milestone inspections are to be done at age 30 or 25, depending on your county. If you're Okaloosa County, it'll be 25, but most of the other state is going to be 30 years. And if the building is over 30 years old, it should have been completed by December 31st of 2024. The next section in 10B is going to be the turnover inspection report. That's the part that they added. And it states that if the the association was turned over by the developer to the owners after July 1st of 2023, they likely would have had the SERS requirements in that inspection, the turnover report.
Yep.
So you here have the options to state that the turnover inspection is required to be completed and has been completed and turned over to the association. Now that will only be required if the condo was turned over after July 1st of 2023. So really new condos only.
Yeah.
Or you say it is not required to be done, or it's required and hasn't been done yet. And then the structural integrity reserve study is 10C, and that is where you say it's required to be done and it's been done, or it's not required to be done.
Yep. And so real quick, because you referenced the 25-year and the discretion. So it's supposed to be 25 years if you're within 3 miles of the coast, but then they came back and said, well, the county can decide to extend it to 30. But as far as we know, Okaloosa Walton has stuck with 25.
As far as we know.
Just keep that in mind. But yes, and so equally important is if the SERS study predates the budget, then you can be fairly confident that the association budget has already accounted for everything within the SERS for purposes of your buyer's due diligence. So there should not be any surprises. Now, if the SERS study postdates the budget, then there could be some skeletons in the closet.
There likely are.
That haven't been revealed yet.
Yes.
Yeah. So keep that in mind as well.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, and then the next thing that I wanted to mention to you guys is just like in paragraph 5, where you had A and B, where you got to say if they've already been provided all of these documents or the contract is voidable within 3 days of receiving the documents. The same thing happens here with the milestone and the SERS, where the buyer can say we've already received the documents, or the agreement is voidable within 3 days of them receiving the documents.
Yep. So another 3-day window.
Yes. So all in all, with this Condo Rider, you've got to get real personal with your CAM, get all those meeting minutes, find out about the milestone inspections. When was the condo turned over from the developer to the owners? Let's see that SERS study, and then you have to disclose everything on this Condo Rider and disclose everything.
Yes, exactly. And before we go, because this just popped in my head, it's also important to get a copy of any of the meeting agendas, because you could have a situation to where, because the minutes don't always come out right after the meeting. It sometimes takes a couple weeks. So you could have a situation where it's in the agenda and discussed at the meeting, but it's not in the minutes until after closing, because the minutes aren't published in time. So, but if it's on the agenda, that's still going to trigger the disclosure requirements. So don't just rely on the minutes. Pull the agendas, as well.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, that just popped in my head as something that could go wrong.
That's a good one.
All right.
And I mean, one time you told someone to disclose an email from the association.
Absolutely.
Dated this date.
Yeah, because it was sent to all the owners. And so, yeah, anything that references any kind of increase in dues, assessments, whatever.
Disclose.
There
you go.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode. We appreciate you listening and or watching. Feel free to, please like us on our social media pages. And if you have any questions, please reach out. And in the meantime, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.